The stars had always called to humanity. For 300 years, they answered that call, spreading across the darkness like seeds carried by wind. By the year 2347, humans had built 3 colonies beyond Earth. They thought they were alone. They were wrong. Admiral Park Do-yeon stood on the bridge of the warship Indomitable. Watching the strange ships appear on his screens, there were hundreds of them, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They moved with terrible purpose, surrounding Colony Horizon 3, like wolves circling prey. "Admiral," his second-in-command Captain Yoonjia said, her voice tight with controlled fear, "we are receiving a transmission." The message was simple. The Velic Dominion, rulers of 47 conquered species, demanded humanity's complete surrender. They gave humans 1 hour to accept. If humans refuse, Horizon 3 would burn as an example. Park Do-yeon had served in the military for 30 years. He had seen death. He had made hard choices, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. He looked at the faces of his crew, young men and women who had joined the fleet expecting peace. Now they faced extinction. "Contact Earth," he ordered. "Tell them what is happening." Ambassador Kong Minho was already on his way to meet the Velic. His diplomatic shuttle crossed the gap between fleets, a tiny speck of hope against the massive alien warships. Park watched the shuttle dock with the Velic command vessel and waited. The hour passed slowly, each minute feeling like a lifetime. The transmission came 43 minutes later. Ambassador Kong's face appeared on screen, pale and sweating. Behind him, tall insectoid creatures watched with compound eyes that showed no emotion. "They are not interested in negotiation," Kong said, his voice breaking. "They say we are too young, too weak. They say joining their dominion is an honor we should accept with gratitude." "Admiral, they are not going to the transmission cut off." On the tactical display, Park watched the Velic fleet open fire on Horizon 3. The colony's shields held for exactly 17 minutes. Then the bombardment began in earnest. 2,400,000 people lived on Horizon 3, families, children, scientists, and farmers, and teachers, and dreamers. The Velic killed them all in less than 6 hours. They did not hurry. They were thorough. Captain Yoon stood beside Park as they watched the colony die. Tears ran down her face, but her jaw was set hard as stone. "What do we do, Admiral?" Park Do-yeon did not answer immediately. His hands gripped the railing until his knuckles turned white. Somewhere on that burning world, his younger brother had been building a school for colony children. Now there was nothing left but ash and memory. "We survive," he finally said. "And then we make them regret this day." The news reached Earth within hours. The World Council gathered in emergency session, their faces showing shock, grief, and fear. Some members argued for surrender. The Velic were too powerful, too advanced. Fighting them would only bring more death. But something unexpected happened in that council chamber. As the debate raged, reports began arriving from Horizon 3's moon. A small garrison of soldiers had survived the initial attack. They had retreated to underground bunkers meant for mining operations. When Velic ground forces came to finish them off, these soldiers fought back. 300 humans held their position against 5,000 Velic warriors for 18 hours. They used mining equipment as weapons. They collapsed tunnels on enemy formations. They fought with knives when their guns ran empty. When the last transmission came, only 12 soldiers remained alive. Their commander, Sergeant Baek Suho, sent a final message before the Velic broke through their defenses. "They can kill us," he said. His voice calm despite the explosions around him, "but they cannot break us. Tell Earth to remember that." The council chamber fell silent as this message played. Something changed in the faces of the representatives. Fear remained, but it was joined by something else. Something harder and more dangerous. The vote for total war was unanimous across the galaxy. Other species watched with curiosity and pity. The Velic had conquered 47 civilizations. Each one had surrendered after the first major defeat. Each one had accepted their place in the Dominion's hierarchy. The pattern was always the same. Young species fought briefly, realized they could not win, submitted to survive. The Velik expected humans to follow this pattern. They had studied human history and seen a species that valued individual life, that built art and music, that debated the ethics of even necessary violence. Such a species would surely choose survival over pride. They did not understand what they had awakened. Admiral T.S. Park received his orders 3 days after Horizon 3 burned. He was to take command of the combined human fleet, every warship humanity possessed. His mission was simple on paper and impossible in practice. He was to defend humanity until they could find a way to fight back. Captain Yoon found him in his quarters that night, staring at a photograph of his brother's family. She said nothing, simply standing beside him in silent support. "They think we are like the others," Park finally said. "The species that surrendered. They think we will calculate the odds, see that we cannot win, and give up. Will we?" Yoon asked. Park looked at her. His eyes had changed since Horizon 3. Something soft had burned away, leaving only cold determination behind. "No," he said. "We will not win this war with ships and weapons. We are too few and too weak. But we will win it with something the Velik do not understand." "What is that, Admiral?" Park stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned with cold indifference. Somewhere among them, the Velik were planning their next move, confident in their inevitable victory. Park said quietly, "Stubbornness. The refusal to die quietly. They killed millions of our people to make us afraid. Instead, they made us angry. They expected us to break." He turned back to face Yoon, and she saw something frightening in his expression. "Instead, we will become ruthless." The next morning, Admiral Park addressed the fleet. His words were broadcast to every human ship, every colony, every outpost where humanity still drew breath. "They burned our world expecting us to kneel," he said, his voice carrying across the void. "They murdered our families thinking we would beg for mercy. They do not understand what they have awakened. We are not sheep to be slaughtered. We are not slaves to be broken. We are humanity, and we do not forgive. We do not forget. And we do not surrender." The war had begun. The galaxy expected it to end quickly, with humanity crushed beneath the Velik boot like so many species before. The galaxy was wrong. 6 months had passed since Horizon 3 burned. The Velik had expected the war to end in weeks. It had not ended. It had only grown worse. General Beek Suho stood before the War Council. The same man who had sent that final transmission from Horizon 3's moon. He had survived against all odds, rescued by a daring raid that cost 12 ships and 400 lives. Now he carried the weight of that sacrifice every day. "We cannot defeat them in open battle," Beek told the gathered commanders. "Their ships are faster. Their weapons are stronger. Their numbers are greater. If we fight like a traditional military, we will lose." "Then what do you suggest?" Admiral Park Do-yeon asked from his seat at the head of the table. Beek activated the display behind him. Images appeared showing human colonies, mining stations, and outposts scattered across a dozen star systems. "We make them pay for every inch of ground," Beek said. "Every world they take costs them ships, soldiers, and time. We turn every colony into a trap. We fight not to hold territory, but to bleed them dry." This was the birth of the Thorn Doctrine. The name came from an old Earth saying, "The flower that grows thorns survives, while prettier flowers are eaten." Humanity would become a flower covered in thorns. It's painful to swallow. Dr. Han Youngji led the weapons development program. She was a small woman with tired eyes and brilliant mind. Before the war, she had designed medical equipment meant to save lives. Now she designed weapons meant to end them. "I have developed something," she told Admiral Park during a private meeting. Her hands shook slightly as she handed him the data. "We call it the Widowmaker." Park studied the information. The Widowmaker was a missile designed to target Velik breeding queens specifically. The Velik reproduce through a complex hierarchy, with queens producing thousands of eggs. Kill the queens, and Velik population growth would collapse within a generation. "This is genocide," Park said quietly. Han Young-ji met his eyes without flinching. "Yes, It is. I designed a weapon for genocide, Admiral. I do not sleep well anymore. I see their faces in my dreams, the queens and the children they would have had. But I also see the faces of the children on Horizon 3. I see my own daughter who died there. Her voice broke briefly before she continued. I will carry this sin. I ask only that you use it wisely. Park approved the weapon. It was never meant to be used for extinction, only as a threat. But its existence changed everything. For the first time, the Velek understood that humanity could hurt them in ways that would last generations. The colony world of New Sol fell 3 months later. 14 million people had lived there, working farms and factories that fed the human war effort. When the Velek invasion fleet arrived, they expected the same pattern as before: orbital bombardment, ground assault, quick surrender. Instead, they found empty cities. The entire population had been evacuated weeks before. Not a single civilian remained. But the Velek ground forces landed anyway, searching for the factories and resources they needed. That was when the traps activated. Buildings collapsed without warning, crushing hundreds of Velek soldiers. Water supplies had been poisoned with substances that destroyed Velek digestive systems. Weapons caches hidden throughout the cities exploded on timers, killing soldiers who thought areas were already secure. The roads themselves were mined. Turning every patrol into a death lottery, the Velek took New Sol. It cost them a third of their invasion fleet and 40,000 ground troops. More importantly, it cost them 3 months of time as they cleared trap after trap. Losing soldiers every day to an enemy that was no longer even there? Lieutenant Shin Tae-yong commanded one of the human strike teams that harassed the Velek occupiers. He was young, barely 25, with a face that looked too gentle for war. But his eyes told a different story. He had lost his entire family on Horizon 3, and that loss had burned away everything soft inside him. We cannot save New Sol, he told his team, as they prepared for another raid. But we can make the Velek remember it forever. His team struck supply convoys, destroyed communication towers, and assassinated officers. They used stolen Velek weapons and wore Velek armor taken from the dead. The Velek soldiers began to fear the shadows, never knowing where the next attack would come from. Across the galaxy, other species watched with growing interest. The Corinth, a race of traitors who had surrendered to the Velek centuries ago, sent secret messages to human commanders. The Maltheri, fierce warriors who had lost a brutal war against the Dominion, offered intelligence about Velek weaknesses. Even the Velek's own subject species began to whisper about the humans who refused to break. They are calling us something in their language, Captain Yoon reported to Admiral Park. The translation is roughly the ones who bite back. It seems we have become famous. Park did not smile. Famous is not the same as victorious. How many people have we lost this month? The number was difficult to hear. 200,000 civilians dead in Velek raids. 30 ships destroyed in battle. 5 outposts overrun despite all their traps and preparations. Humanity was still losing the war, just more slowly than expected. But something was changing. The Velek had started the war confident in their inevitable victory. Now their commanders wrote reports filled with frustration and uncertainty. Their soldiers refused assignments to human-occupied space, fearful of the endless traps and ambushes. Their breeding queens demanded to know why so many warriors were dying against a species that should have already surrendered. Dr. Han Yunji received reports of her weapons being used across every battlefield. The Widowmaker missiles had never been deployed in full, but smaller versions targeted Velek officers with terrifying accuracy. Her other inventions, things she tried not to think about at night, were turning the tide of individual battles, if not the entire war. Are we becoming monsters? She asked Admiral Park during one of their meetings. Park considered the question carefully. Perhaps, he admitted, but we are alive monsters, and our children will survive to judge us. The Velek commander who had ordered the destruction of Horizon 3 received a report at the end of the 6th month of war. Casualty figures, resource expenditures, timeline projections, all of it pointed to a disturbing conclusion. They are not fighting to win, he realized as he read the data. They know they cannot defeat us in open combat. They are fighting to make victory cost more than it is worth. He had conquered 12 species in his career. All of them had fought hard at first, then calculated the odds and surrendered. It was logical. It was sensible. It was what any rational species would do. Humans were not being rational. They were being stubborn, spiteful, and endlessly creative in their cruelty. They were turning every victory into a curse, every conquest into a wound that would not heal. For the first time in his long military career, the Velic commander felt something he did not recognize. It was fear. 2 years had passed since the war began. Humanity had lost 4 colonies and 890 million lives. The numbers were staggering, almost too large to comprehend. Every human alive knew someone who had died. Grief had become as common as breathing, but something had changed. Humanity was no longer simply defending. They were attacking. Commander O'Hygen stood on the bridge of the Ghost, the first ship of humanity's new strike fleet. The vessel was an ugly thing, built from salvaged Velic technology and human engineering. It looked like a creature stitched together from dead parts, which was exactly what it was. "We have confirmation," her tactical officer reported. "The Velic supply convoy is passing through the Drift Nebula as predicted." 12 cargo ships. For escort cruisers, Jean studied the display with cold calculation. She had been a cargo pilot before the war, moving goods between colonies. Now she commanded a fleet of killers, and she did not feel guilty about it. "Signaled the pack," she ordered. "We hunt tonight." The Ghost fleet struck without warning. Human ships emerged from hidden positions throughout the nebula, their weapons modified to bypass Velic shields. The cargo ships never had a chance. The escort cruisers fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered by an enemy that knew their every weakness. When the battle ended, 12 Velic cargo ships drifted as burning wrecks. Inside them had been supplies for 3 Velic invasion armies, food and weapons and medicine that would never reach their destinations. The invasion of colony prosperity would be delayed by months, while the Velic scrambled to replace what they had lost. Sergeant Kwon Jun-ho watched the battle from a different perspective entirely. He was not on any ship. He was on the surface of a Velic breeding world, dressed in stolen Velic worker garments. Carrying a small container that would change the course of the war zone was an infiltration specialist, one of humanity's best. He had spent 18 months learning Velic language, customs, and biology. He could pass as a servant among them, invisible and unremarkable. Tonight, he would use that invisibility to deliver a weapon that Dr. Han Yunji had designed with trembling hands. The breeding chambers were deep underground. Vast caverns filled with warmth and moisture where Velic queens produced thousands of eggs each day. Junho moved through the complex with practiced calm, avoiding guards and workers as he made his way to the central water supply. The container he carried held a genetic weapon. It would not kill any Velic directly. Instead, it would alter the development of eggs exposed to treated water. 40% of new hatched Velic would be sterile, unable to ever reproduce. The Velic would not discover this until years later, when an entire generation failed to produce offspring. Junho placed the container and activated it. Then he walked out the same way he had come in, just another worker finishing a long shift. By the time the sun rose, he was aboard an extraction shuttle heading back to human space. He did not feel like a hero. He felt like a monster. But he remembered his parents, who had died on Horizon 3. He remembered his little sister, who had been only 7 years old. The Velic had shown no mercy to her. He would show no mercy to them. Across the galaxy, Empress Velicthara sat on her ancient throne and read reports that grew worse with each passing week. She had ruled the Dominion for 200 years, overseeing the conquest of a dozen species. Never had she faced a war like this one. "The humans have made contact with the Corinth underground," her advisor reported. "Trade networks are being used to smuggle weapons and information. We have also detected communications between human commanders and Maltheri resistance cells." The Empress clicked her mandibles in frustration. The Corinth and Maltheri had been conquered generations ago. They had seemed completely broken, their spirits crushed beyond recovery. Now, they were rising again, inspired by humanity's refusal to surrender. "These humans are spreading rebellion like a disease," she observed. "Yes, Majesty. And there is more. 3 days ago, human forces struck the throne moon." The Empress went still. The throne moon was the most sacred place in Velic space, home to monuments that had stood for 10,000 years. It was the spiritual heart of the Dominion, protected by the largest defensive fleet in existence. "Damage?" she asked, though she already feared the answer. "The monument of eternal conquest has been destroyed." The human commander broadcast a message as her ships withdrew. She said the advisor hesitated. "Speak," she said, "you destroyed our home. Now you understand how it feels." Commander Ohijin had led that raid personally. 72 human ships against 300 Velic defenders. They had lost half their fleet breaking through, but the survivors had reached the moon and delivered their payload. The monument had stood since before humanity discovered fire. Now it was rubble. Hyjin had watched it fall from her bridge, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. She knew historians would judge her. She knew philosophers would debate whether she had gone too far. She did not care. Her father had been on Horizon 3. Her mother had died in the evacuation of New Sol. The monument was just stone. Her family had been flesh and blood. The Empress made her decision. She would offer the humans a ceasefire. Not peace, not yet, but a pause in the fighting. Time to negotiate. Time to find some way to end this war before it destroyed everything both species valued. Her message reached Admiral Park Do-yoon. 1 week later. The terms were simple. Both sides would stop fighting while diplomats talked. The Velic would withdraw from 2 contested systems as a gesture of goodwill. In exchange, they asked only that humanity agreed to discuss terms. Admiral Park read the message 3 times before responding. His reply was 4 words long: "Return our dead." All of them. It was an impossible demand. Millions of humans had died on Vela-controlled worlds. Their bodies had been disposed of like garbage, cremated, or simply left to rot. There was no way to return what no longer existed, but that was the point. Park was not negotiating. He was sending a message. Humanity would accept nothing less than complete Velic surrender. Every compromise, every half measure, every diplomatic solution was rejected before it could begin. A galactic news service broadcast a special report that night. An alien journalist, a member of a species that had surrendered to the Velic long ago, spoke directly to viewers across 100 worlds. "We expected humans to be another conquered race," she said, her voice filled with something that might have been wonder. "We expected them to fight briefly, then accept reality. We were wrong. They do not forget what was done to them. They do not forgive those who hurt them, and they do not stop fighting until their enemies are broken." She paused, her alien eyes reflecting emotions that translated across species boundaries. The galaxy should remember this. Humanity is not just fighting for survival anymore. They are fighting for revenge, and they will not stop until they have it. In the war rooms of the Velic Dominion, commanders studied tactical displays with growing despair. The humans were everywhere now, their ghost fleet striking without warning. Their infiltrators sabotaging critical infrastructure. Their allies rising up in rebellions that spread faster than they could be crushed. The war was not over. But the outcome was no longer certain. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Velic Dominion was afraid. For years after Horizon 3 burned, humanity stood at the edge of total victory and complete damnation. President. No Jewel looked at the weapon specifications on her desk and felt her soul grow cold. The documents described something called Project Silence, a fleet of automated ships carrying enough destructive power to sterilize an entire planet. Enough ships had been built to destroy every Velic world in existence. "We can end them," General Beek Suho said, standing at attention before her desk. "Completely, permanently. No Velic will survive to threaten us again." Jiwoo had been a university professor before the war, teaching ethics and philosophy to students who now fought and died across the stars. She had never wanted to be president. But the previous leaders had been killed when the Velic destroyed Earth's original capital, and someone had to lead. Genocide, she said quietly. You are asking me to authorize genocide? I am asking you to ensure our survival, Beak replied. The Velic killed nearly 1 billion of our people. They did it without remorse, without hesitation. If we leave them alive, they will rebuild. They will remember their defeat. And someday, they will come for us again. There was logic in his words. Cold, terrible logic that kept Jiwoo awake at night. The Velic had shown humanity what happened to species that showed weakness. Maybe the only way to be truly safe was to ensure no enemy remained to threaten them. Admiral Park. Do-yeon entered the office without knocking. He had aged 20 years and 4, his hair white and his face carved with lines of exhaustion. But his eyes were still sharp, still filled with the determination that had kept humanity fighting through impossible odds. I heard Beak's proposal, Park said. I disagree with it. Beak's jaw tightened. With respect, Admiral, you have led our forces through this entire war. You have seen what the Velic did to our people. How can you argue for mercy? I am not arguing for mercy, Park replied. I am arguing for survival, not physical survival. We have already achieved that. I am arguing for the survival of our humanity. He walked to the window and looked out at the city below. It was new construction, built after the Velic destroyed the old capital. Already children played in parks, and couples walked together along tree-lined streets. Life continued, even in the midst of war. We became ruthless to survive, Park said. We did things that would have horrified us before Horizon 3. We poisoned water supplies. We developed weapons that target breeding populations. We burned sacred monuments that stood for millennia. All of it was necessary. I do not regret the choices we made. He turned back to face them. But if we choose genocide now, when we have already won, we become something worse than the Velic. They killed us because they saw us as inferior, as beneath consideration. If we destroy them, we do it knowing exactly what we are doing. We do it with full understanding that billions of innocent Velic will die for the crimes of their leaders. Dr. Han Youngji had been waiting outside the office. She entered now, her eyes red from crying, her hands clutching a folder of documents. I have been studying Velic society, she said. Most of their population had no voice in the war. Their hierarchy is rigid beyond anything we know. Common Velic are born into their roles and cannot change them. The queens who ordered our destruction represent less than 1% of their species. She opened her folder and spread photographs across the president's desk. Images of Velic children in education centers. Velic workers tending crops. Velic artists creating strange and beautiful sculptures. They are not all monsters, Han said. Many of them never wanted this war. Many of them have lost family just as we have. If we destroy them all, we punish the innocent for the crimes of the guilty. President No studied the photographs with tears forming in her eyes. Before the war, she had written papers about the ethics of collective punishment. She had argued that no crime, however terrible, justified the death of innocents. Now she held the power to make that philosophical position real. What do you recommend, Admiral? She asked. Park had thought about this question every day for months. We demand unconditional surrender. We dismantle their military completely. We remove their ability to ever threaten us again. But we leave their people alive. We let them rebuild, under our supervision, as a changed society. And if they refuse to surrender, then we continue fighting until they do. But we do not cross the line into extermination. We win this war as humans, not as monsters. The debate continued for 3 days. Outside the government building, crowds gathered to demand vengeance. They carried photographs of loved ones lost on Horizon 3, New Soul, and a dozen other worlds. Their grief was real, their anger justified. They wanted the Velic to suffer as humanity had suffered. But on the 4th day, unexpected news arrived. A Velic shuttle had crossed into human space, carrying a single passenger who requested immediate audience with human leadership ambassador Kethrix was old for a Velic. His exoskeleton faded and cracked with age. He had been a diplomat for 200 years, serving the Dominion through countless negotiations. Now he served a different purpose. The Empress has been removed from power, he announced to the assembled human leadership. A council of queens has taken control. They have authorized me to offer unconditional surrender. The room erupted in noise. Some leaders cheered. Others demanded proof. General Beak stood silent, his face unreadable. Why? President No asked when the noise died down. Why surrender now, when you still have fleets that could fight? Ketherick's compound eyes shifted, an expression that humans had learned to read as sadness. Because we are dying, Madam President. Your genetic weapons have begun to take effect. Our birth rates have collapsed by 40%. In 2 generations, our population will be half what it is today. In 5 generations, we will be extinct. He paused, struggling with words in a language that was not his own. We started this war believing you were weak. We thought you would break easily, as other species had broken. Instead, you taught us that you are more dangerous than we ever imagined. You taught us that mercy is a choice, not a weakness. And you taught us that if we did not surrender, you would destroy us completely. Admiral Park stepped forward. We could still destroy you. We have the weapons. We have the capability. Why do you think we will choose otherwise? Ketherick's met his eyes without fear. Because I have studied your species, Admiral. You are capable of great cruelty when threatened. But you are also capable of great compassion when the threat has passed. You could have used your full arsenal against us at any time. You did not. That tells me there is something in humanity worth believing in. President No made her decision. We accept your surrender. But understand this clearly. We will never forget what your species did to us. We will never trust you completely. And if you ever threaten us again, we will finish what you started. Ow! She stood and walked to the window. Looking out at the city full of survivors, we could end you, she said, her voice carrying the weight of 1 billion deaths. We choose not to. But the galaxy should understand something about humanity. We made this choice. We can always another. The war ended that night. Across human space, celebrations erupted as news of the surrender spread. Soldiers wept with relief. Families embraced, grateful to have survived. Church bells rang on 100 worlds. But beneath the joy, something harder remained. Humanity had changed. The innocent species that had reached for the stars with hope and wonder was gone forever. In its place stood something stronger, darker, and infinitely more dangerous. They had proven they could be ruthless. Now they would prove they could be merciful. The galaxy watched and remembered. 10 years had passed since the war ended. The galaxy had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible before humanity's first contact with the Velic. Old empires trembled. New alliances formed, and at the center of it all stood humanity, forever transformed by what they had survived. Ambassador Yunjia walked through the halls of the Galactic Council, her footsteps echoing against ancient stone. She had been a warship captain once, fighting in battles that cost thousands of lives. Now she carried humanity's voice to the gathered species of known space. The council chamber was vast, designed to humble visitors with its scale. Representatives from 200 species sat in tiered rows, watching as Yoon took her place at the speaking platform. Most of them had lived through the Human-Velic War as observers. Watching from safe distance as 2 species tried to destroy each other, they had learned much from that observation. The Dominion of Krath has demanded that humanity withdraw from the prosperity sector, Yoon announced, reading from the formal complaint. They claim our presence threatens regional stability. They suggest we remember our place as a young species in an old galaxy. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Krath were powerful, their empires spanning 300 worlds. Before the war, such a demand would have terrified humanity. Now, it simply annoyed them. Our response is simple, Yoon continued. No, we will not withdraw. We will not accept threats. And we will not remember our place because we no longer have one. We are not a young species to be bullied by our elders. We are humanity, and we bow to no one. The Krath ambassador rose to protest, his 4 arms gesturing with outrage. But before he could speak, other voices joined the conversation. The Corinth representatives stood in support of humanity. The Malthury delegation did the same. Even species that had no alliance with humans nodded in silent agreement. The Compact of Thorns had grown since its founding. What began as humanity's alliance with former Velic subjects had expanded into a coalition of species who refused to be victims. They did not share culture or biology or history. They shared only a determination to never again be conquered. The Krath ambassador looked around the chamber and understood. Threatening humanity was not the same as threatening a single species. It meant threatening everyone who had gathered under humanity's protection. He withdrew his complaint. General Shin Tae-young watched the council proceedings. From Earth, seated in his office at the military academy, the walls around him were covered with images from the war, battles won, friends lost, moments that still haunted his dreams. He had been a young lieutenant when Horizon 3 burned. Now he was an old soldier, his body scarred and his mind forever marked by what he had seen. His job was to train the next generation, to pass on the lessons that humanity had learned through blood and suffering. Cadet Sora knocked on his doorframe, waiting for permission to enter. She was 18 years old, born after the war ended. She had never known the terror of Velic bombardment or the desperation of fighting an enemy that could not be stopped. All she knew were the stories, the monuments, and the changed society that had emerged from victory. "You wanted to see me, General?" she asked. Shin nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "I have been reviewing your training scores. You are at the top of your class in tactics and weapons handling. Your instructors say you have the potential to be one of our finest officers." Sora tried not to show her pride. "Thank you, sir, but I am concerned about something." Shin leaned forward, his eyes searching her face. "You have learned how to fight. You have learned how to win. But have you learned why we fight?" The question confused her. "To protect humanity, sir. To ensure what happened before never happens again." "That is part of it," Shin agreed. "But there is more. We fight so that others do not have to. We maintain our strength so that peace remains possible. And we remember our history so that we never become what we fought against." He stood and walked to a window overlooking the training grounds below. Young cadets practiced combat drills, their movements precise and deadly. They were the children of survivors, raised on stories of resistance and revenge. "The Velic killed nearly 1 billion of our people," Shin said. "When the war ended, we had the power to destroy them completely. Do you know why we did not?" Sora hesitated. "Because we are better than they were?" Shin shook his head. "No, we are not better. We are capable of the same cruelty, the same violence, the same evil. What made us different was a choice. We chose to stop. We chose mercy when vengeance was within our grasp. That choice is what separates us from monsters." He turned back to face her. "You will face moments in your career when the easy path is cruelty. When the logical choice is to destroy your enemy completely. When everyone around you demands blood and fire. In those moments, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember that being dangerous is not the same as being evil. We can be both strong and kind. We must be both." Sora absorbed his words in silence. She had grown up hearing tales of human heroism and Velic atrocity. The narrative was simple. They were evil, we were good. Shin was telling her something more complicated and more important. "I understand, sir," she finally said. "Or at least, I think I do." Shin smiled, the expression softening the harsh lines of his face. "Understanding will come with time. For now, just remember that we do not start wars. We end them. And we end them in ways that let us sleep at night." On a Velic world far from Earth, Elder Kethrix taught young Velic about the war their species had started and lost. His students listened with the uncomfortable attention of those learning about shameful history. "We believed we were superior," Kethrix explained. "We thought strength meant the ability to destroy. The humans taught us that true strength is something different. It is the ability to destroy and choose not to." He showed them images of human cities rebuilt after the war. Children played in parks. Artists created beauty. Scientists explored the mysteries of the universe. Life continued, as it always did for species that survived. They could have ended us, Ketherick said. They had every reason to. We had killed their families, burned their worlds, tried to break their spirit. Instead, they offered us a chance to become something better. That mercy was not weakness. It was the greatest display of strength I have ever witnessed. One young Velic raised a limb to ask a question. Do they forgive us for what we did? Ketherick considered his answer carefully. No, they do not forgive. They will never forgive. But they have chosen to build a future anyway, one where Velic and humans can coexist. That is not forgiveness. It is something harder and perhaps more valuable. It is acceptance of what cannot be changed and determination to make something better from the ashes. The stars still burned with cold indifference, as they had for billions of years. But something had changed in the small corner of the galaxy where humanity dwelt. The old order, where young species submitted to their elders or died, had been shattered forever. In its place grew something new. A galaxy where strength came with responsibility, where conquest brought consequences, where even the weakest species could become dangerous if pushed too far. Cadet Sora stood at the window of her dormitory that night, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Krath were plotting. The Velic were rebuilding. 1,000 species were watching humanity, trying to understand what they had become. She thought about General Shin's words, about choices and mercy and the difference between being dangerous and being evil, about the weight of history and the responsibility of power, what made us survive. She had asked him, when so many others didn't? His answer echoed in her mind as she watched the stars. They thought breaking us would be easy. They didn't understand. Humans don't break. We adapt. We endure. And when we're pushed too far, she smiled grimly, seeing her own reflection in the glass. We push back harder. The galaxy had expected humanity to shatter under the weight of the Velic assault. Instead, they had bent, changed, and emerged as something new. Something harder. Something that would never be easy prey again. The long shadow of the war stretched across generations. Children grew up knowing they lived because their grandparents had refused to surrender. Monuments remembered the dead. Treaties enforced the peace. And humanity stood watch, patient and dangerous. Ready to protect what they had built, they had become exactly what the galaxy feared. A species that could not be broken. But they had also become something the galaxy had not expected. A species that could choose when to be merciful. That combination made them more dangerous than any empire, any weapon, any threat the universe had yet devised. And the stars watched, and remembered and waited to see what humanity would become next.